me. So there it is, it's a comic. It's about how we change and grow up, and it's aimed at 6- and 7-year-olds. It was published by the Family Planning Association in England. There's a 2-page spread of a drawn nude boy and girl, and the task for the children is to draw a line from the name to the part of the body that it's referring to. And it includes arms, legs, ears, nipples, penis, testicles, vagina, etc. And this caused a huge media uproar. These quotes appeared in nearly all local and national papers across the country. What happened was a press association reported, wrote one press release and sent it all around the place, and all the newspapers picked it up. The Daily Telegraph sex education booklet aimed at 6-year-olds, BBC News sex education for 6-year-olds, Mail Online. Now schools introduced a sex guide for your 6-year-olds. Margaret Morrissey, who's involved with the Parent Teachers Association, don't necessarily read it all. It's unfair to burden very young children with explicit details and then wonder why they say words and do things not acceptable in schools. I mean, I find this rather odd, because if you give them the right names for body parts, they're less likely to say words which are not acceptable, but I haven't confronted her with that. And then we cannot expect small children to cope with the amount of information. Government want primary schools to implant sort of implied brainwashing here about implanting something into children's minds about the names of their own bodies. And then Trevor Stammers of the Family Education Trust, there's a constant emphasis on biological knowledge and absence of understanding that feelings can be hurt and sex outside a loving relationship leads to damage and retreat. Nothing about sex. So I thought I'd warn you. I'll show you the picture, but some of you may wish to look away now if you're easily offended. And there it is. So these quotes, which were in every local and national newspaper by high-status authority figures, are read by people, everyday people, struggling, making little policies about how to answer their children's questions. And so how you call that a sex guide, I really don't know. There's nothing to do with what you do with different bits of the body, and when, and with whom, and under what conditions. Okay, the second example is there's been quite a lot of interest amongst some people in England about increasing the role of pleasure in sex education, and there was a conference in Sheffield, sexual health workers, youth workers, teachers, and so on. And there was a very strong commitment at the end of the conference to people working with young people getting more support in how to deal with issues of pleasure. So the Sheffield Centre produced a booklet, which I helped them write. It was the bestseller of all their many publications. There it is. I have a copy of that as well, if anyone wants to look at it. Now, it was written in a fairly light-hearted way, because obviously sex is quite embarrassing for a lot of people, but one of the phrases that was used, an orgasm a day keeps the doctor away. Now, we have a phrase in English, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, which nobody believes. It's not scientifically proven. It's just a principle. So this was put in because it thought it might make people feel a bit relaxed. Anyway, so the booklet was sold by many, many people, very, very popular. And then a certain group, the Maranatha community, which is a rather strong evangelical group, got hold of it, put out press releases, complained to the government that National Health Service money was being spent on this disgusting book. It was, as I say, light-hearted. The quote went around the world. If you Google it, it actually comes up everywhere. The director of the centre, Steve Slack, received personal hate messages like, "I hope you die of AIDS." That was a fairly mild one. Unbelievable what this sort of thing unleashes in the population. Family and Youth Concern, which is the same organisation that Trevor Stammers works for, was quoted in the Daily Mail before they'd even read it. And I know that because I did a live interview with Trevor Stammers on the World Service, on the BBC World Service, and I asked him live, had you read it when you made that quote in the Daily Mail? He said, no, I hadn't. I'd had trouble getting hold of it. And now, this is a doctor. It seems to me irresponsible to make a public quote criticising other people's work when you haven't even read what you're criticising. So what he said was the leaflet would encourage risky behaviour, an increase in STIs. Actually, the leaflet's about masturbation, really. It's not really about sex. It's unbelievers being sent to schools, which it isn't. I'd like to know what scientific evidence there is to back this up. There's an awful lot of overpaid and underoccupied health promotion officers around the world who are obsessed with sex. Well, that may be true, but I don't think this book actually demonstrates it. And he added that inciting underage sex was nothing less than encouraging child abuse. So this was on the front page of the Daily Mail. It was in a lot of the local newspapers, and he hadn't even read the book when he said it. So you imagine parents who are maybe wanting to say to their young people, actually, sex is quite nice, reading that, thinking, am I contributing to something negative? So the booklet's never been sent to schools. It's available for purchase. It's certainly not encouraging underage sex. Almost the opposite, actually, because the implicit message is if young people feel comfortable about masturbating, they may actually be less likely to go and find sex and coerce somebody into sex. And Dean Doris, who's one of our members of Parliament, said in Parliament that the booklet was sent to all 11-year-olds in Sheffield, which it isn't. That was a lie. Now, I don't know if in England we have something called parliamentary privilege, where MPs can say things in Parliament and not be legally sued for it. So I'm saying now that's a lie, and she knew it was a lie when she said it. So what happens? This constant drip feed of sensationalist treatment, including veiled accusations of child abuse, affects politician views. They have direct lobbying from groups, of course. These organisations I mentioned write to MPs almost every week. There's a fear of public reaction and votes. It affects people's confidence, little p, people's confidence and willingness to discuss issues with their children. It adds into their existing uncertainties and nervousness about sex. It's transmitted to teachers, parents, service providers, school governors, media staff and young people. And it has consequences for openness and comfort, which, as I've argued earlier on, is protective in terms of sexual health. So the effects of silences. Silence allows secrecy, mystery and mystification. So many young people are growing up thinking sex is secret, their bodies are mystified. This has certain implications. It encourages secret exploring because people they trust haven't taken them into their confidence and told them what the evidence is, and the secret exploring often happens through friends, through pornography. A lot of young people access pornography in order to learn about sex, not necessarily for stimulation, but just to learn, and through experimentation. So we're setting up conditions in which sexual health will be negatively affected through these processes, and also a denial of agency and responsibility, and this links with consent. If you're saying to young people it's a mystery and it's secret, then how can they take control of their activity? And there's a lack of a suitable language and discourse with which to discuss these issues. And just recently in England, we've had a really big challenge on the whole issue of safeguarding. I know that's been around for many years. Sexual abuse occurs in all countries, in many institutions. Nobody has a monopoly on it, but just recently one of our famous children's TV celebrities who just died last year, but it's now turned out that he was it's alleged, a serial sexual abuser, and over 300 cases are being investigated by the police at the moment. This has caused a real shock. How is it 300 young people didn't report what was going on? Or if they did report it, they weren't taken seriously because the language they have and the discourse maybe wasn't strong enough. We've got lots of anecdotal evidence that if young people know the names of their body parts, it's actually easier to tell people what's going on. If an abuser is saying, you mustn't tell anybody what I'm doing, this is our little secret, if they've already got a discourse of secrecy, it's much easier for them to operate within that. So as a purely pragmatic approach, we're using the safeguarding approach now to try and convince some of the people that are blocking a more positive approach to sexual health, they may actually be contributing to this veil of secrecy within which abuse can occur more readily. So finally, we need to understand the complexity of early sexual learning and discourse, and we need to make sex more public. If not what people actually do, at least how they talk about it and think about it and the discourses they use. We need to realise that policymakers with both a big P and a little p and practitioners have and may try to impose their own personal views. So doctors and nurses in England will respond often according to what they personally believe they should do rather than according to professional guidelines. We need to take every opportunity as public health people or researchers to challenge these barriers to progress, including the media. We do media workshops, not sure they always work, but I always challenge media people if they write something sensational. I phone them up and I say, look, what's going on? What was your sex education like? Etc. And really try and engage them in a discussion and say, sensationalise it actually contributes to the problems that we're trying to solve. We need to use the safeguarding agenda to reinforce case. I know I said we shouldn't base everything on a negative approach, but in this case, when you're dealing with some fairly right-wing politicians, sometimes safeguarding is a useful handle on which to hang some of these arguments. We need to be supported and comforted by the research evidence, which is clear in the direction of openness being protective. We need to attempt a unified approach, and there are ways that we're working on to try and do that, so schools and parents and others work in a similar way and use a similar discourse. And we need to be determined to provide our young people with the support and opportunities that they need and want in order to have successful and protected sexual health in their careers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we've had two very excellent presentations. I now open the floor for questions. If not, then I'll do the first round myself. And Christina, can I take you to the psychosocial aspects of morbidity? And Roger, I will take you on the psychosocial aspects of sexual health, because what is intriguing in what you've said, in my opinion, is does the psychosocial aspect of morbidity vary dependent on the culture you live in, the country you live in, the place or the particular ethnic group you belong to, or the religion you belong to?
If we have a holistic view, looking at not only the individual, but the psychosocial and physical environment, I'm sure it varies a lot. And I know not enough about different countries to say how it varies. But if you, for instance, are in a wheelchair, to what extent that how society is organized allow you to participate in society regarding, high stairs or whatever? To what extent does the society exclude you if you are a woman as compared to men, if you are a homosexual, or if you have children, or different types of functional limitations? These are aspects that need to be looked at how it's handled.
It's a real problem, of course. In many countries, the faith guides what people should and shouldn't know, and some sex education material. For example, India had a very active program being planned at national level, and then when it came to implementation, a lot of the local areas said this is not appropriate for our children, and they didn't go ahead. Now, in England, we have a problem with some of the Islamic groups. There's obviously various shades of opinion. Some of them are much more proactive than others. This notion that if you talk to young people about their own bodies, or about even just naming the body parts, will somehow encourage them to go off and have sex, is something we really have to address. Now, I was in a workshop in the Netherlands some years ago, organised by Rutgers Nisso and WPF, and there was a workshop I went to with two Muslim girls who've been living in the Netherlands, I think, all their lives, and it was quite amazing. They stood there with the veil, saying that they had chosen to be virgins until they were married, but all the questions that the audience put to them, they knew everything there was to know about sex. And it was a really wonderful demonstration of how it's quite possible to know things, be confident to talk about it, but still make choices that they felt comfortable with. And I would like to have wrapped those up and taken them back to England and confronted different groups with those to show we can separate out knowledge and choices, and that one doesn't necessarily imply the other. And I think that's a really important message that we've got to address. It isn't easy to address it, but we have to work towards it if we're serious about improving public health for everybody, not just for the libertarian North Europeans who happen to have got it right about 30 years ago.
Yes, can I have, yes, here in the front, please?
Thank you. Lea den Broeder from the Netherlands, National Institute of Public Health and the Environment. In both of the talks, there is a very strong element of gender issues, both in sickness at work and also, obviously, in the sexual health. Now, we all know that women are disadvantaged in many aspects, both in work and in sex. And it is quite obvious to target the disadvantaged group in your interventions. Whereas it might be interesting to also look at the other group and target interventions on the male population. Could you please respond to that?
You want to start?
The research I'm describing was just a very small segment of what we do. We work with young men extensively as well. And I agree with everything you've said, that obviously you can't just, about 20 years ago in England, we had this big female empowerment movement, and the answer was seen to be empower women, then everything would be okay. I certainly don't sign up to that. I think we have to do a lot to empower women, but we also have to do a lot to depower men.
I fully agree with you that you need to work with, of course, both men and women, and both men and women need to get more knowledge on how their body works and mind works, and how to protect themselves against different types of disease and unwanted pregnancies, and to protect their reproductive health in different ways as well. And this goes both ways. If men are more empowered in these ways, that will also promote the situation of women, I'm sure.
Sorry, I'm always scared about being misunderstood. When I said depower men, that was a joke. Okay, we have to empower men not to be like men, or like they think they should be to be men. That's what I meant to say. And there are there is quite a lot of work going on now that is proving to be quite beneficial.
There is also, when we talk about reproductive health and unwanted pregnancies and so, there is another aspect, and that is the self-esteem of both women and men, in the ways that now there is a lot about talking in bad ways about sexuality and sexually active women and men in different ways.
Yes, is there? Yes, at the back. Sir?
Thank you for your inspiring introductions. I want to link both introductions of you, the work part and the sexual part, because I think we in public health are facing a new problem. In Holland we call it the 30s dilemma. We expect for women to have a career, to have children in a later phase. So in Holland, the number of IVFs are growing. What is a wise way? Let's put it simple. I advise my daughter, a wise girl has her pregnancy in time. Because when you postpone your pregnancies, it is sometimes disappointing for women. And that's part of the work thing too. You know, the employer must, give the right regulations.
Yes, can I have the question from here as well, so that we can then, after that?
Hi, my name's Tom Farrer. I'm a locum public health consultant from England. And my first question is actually, it was by my friend, which is, why is it that we believe in informed consent and informed choice for everything else, but not in sex? Which I think is quite an interesting issue. And the second one is, as I'm sure you're aware, public health in England is moving into the local authority and it's supposed to have much, much closer links